think people today are feeling untethered. They really feel like they're rootless
Yeah.
as they, look around, and it just seems that there's just such chaos swirling around them.
Mhm.
And for us within the Christian tradition, it's so wonderful to be able to say, we have friends who have gone before us.
Mhm.
This, that great cloud of witnesses.
Welcome to the Journey with the Giant podcast. I'm Robert Prince, and I'm so glad you're here today. This series is inspired by the upcoming book, Journey with the Giant. Choose your guide, pursue your purpose, and grow in your walk with God, by author and spiritual director Lori G. Melton. This is part 2 of our conversation with Sister Diane Zerfas. In part 1, we heard the story of Lori's very first meeting with Sister Diane. That's the spark that launched her on this journey. And we were reminded that walking with the giant isn't about having all the right answers. It's about slowing down, noticing God's presence in our stories, and remembering that at the center of it all, we are deeply loved by God. Today, we pick up right where we left off. We'll talk about how to start, what to notice, and why community multiplies this practice. You'll hear about transformations Sister Diane has witnessed in her students as they walk with giants like Brother Lawrence, Hildegard of Bingen, and others. And we'll close with her prayer for this practice, one that still echoes in my heart today. Let's jump back in.
So Sister Diane, what do you think makes this practice different than just reading biographies or studying in seminary? What do you think?
I think that's the key. It's not a study. It's not academic. It's not, can I answer a question about this? What did this person mean on page 36, paragraph 3? It's, how did this person live? And how can that be an invitation to me to live with more depth, with more connection, with more relationship to the people around me? And I think that makes a big difference to people that, it's not like you have to take notes so you can remember every detail. It's the passion, the energy that comes from, here was a good person who worked and struggled and made a difference. And is that not what we all want to do? We want to, touch the world in such a way that we can say, when the Son of Man returns, will he find any faith on earth? And I want to make sure that he can say yes. Now, it might not be my faith, and it might not be the people that are around me, but maybe that next generation or the next generation. We become part of that unfolding. So that's where the passion, I think, can come.
Yeah.
And I
So-
just, we've had people who've come like from a seminary or a background, and they'll come, they said, oh, I've studied this for 5 years. And then we got to the section on spiritual direction, and it was an empty chapter. Oh, no. Or they came to exploring of discernment and the spirit. You need to kind of take a look at what Ignatius could tell us. And who would expect anything from Ignatius? He was a soldier in the 16th century, and wine, women, and song was Ignatius. And yet in his injury during a battle, he had like a year's time in bed with nothing to read. And so his sister-in-law found a book on Jesus and one on the saints, and he thought, I can do that. And I think that's what became then part of our spiritual giants, because, he wanted to, preach like Peter and Paul. And he grabbed a hold of that image of, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? And for his line, it was, what does it profit a person to gain the whole world and lose his soul? And he was pretty sure he was losing his soul. So his time of recuperation then was an invitation to live a different life.
Yeah. There's another example.
Yes.
So here's the gold right here, Sister Diane. You have walked with students for almost 20 years, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Walking with Giants. I
Uh-huh.
wondered if you could share a couple stories of some of the transformations you've seen in their lives.
Mhm. One woman, she chose the Brother Lawrence, whom you've probably never heard of, but Brother Lawrence only wrote one book. And that's why she chose him. 'Cause she said, I won't have to study very much. I won't have to read very much. He only wrote one small book. So that's why she picked that one. And Brother Lawrence was a monk, but he spent his whole life in the kitchen peeling potatoes and doing dishes. And he said, I feel closer to Jesus when I'm doing for the community than when I'm in the chapel, supposedly praying holy thoughts. He was a person who had to do. And so this woman, starts reading Brother Lawrence, and she comes in after the second month and she said, Brother Lawrence says that I need to get rid of all my junk. This is what she said. So I took 3 big containers to the Goodwill. And she comes back the next month and she said, Brother Lawrence says I still need to simplify. So I have a 4-bedroom home and it's just me. And so I'm going to sell that house. I don't need it. So she moved into a 1-bedroom condo. And she said, and what I realize is I have so much more time now for what's really important rather than cleaning and sorting and trying to figure out where to spend the next dollar. And it was so amazing because every month she'd come in and she'd say, Brother Lawrence says. And it's like, I read Brother Lawrence and I didn't see that in there, but she did.
Yeah.
And so it made a big difference. Yeah. The other piece, sometimes people will choose an author, someone that they had read a long time ago. And I love when they finally realize that the story is their story. So as they read, Dietrich Bonhoeffer or Madeleine L'Engle or, someone who's, kind of famous in the writing, but it becomes so much more personal. We had, I don't usually have 2 people with the same giant, but one year, 2 people were adamant. They both wanted Hildegard of Bingen. And the man was a musician, and he loved Hildegard's music.
Oh.
So every time he would come in, he would play a piece, or he played the wind instruments, so he would learn, and he would come in and share it with us. The woman was a poet, an author, and she loved that Hildegard wrote. So it would not know they were the same giant because they approached it from such different places. But I love to think that a musician, here's Hildegard from like around the year 1000. And because she could write down her music, he could play it. And because she was able to record her visions of the beauty of God, this woman wanted to learn how to write that kind of poetry. So that's the piece. I always feel like a giant opens the door for you so that you can hear and see and feel in ways that God wants to give you. But we don't always take the time to do that.
Yeah.
So that was the joy of Brother Lawrence and Hildegard and authors. Yeah. And sometimes someone will come in and they're sure that this is the person that they want. And usually my question is why? Why is that important to you? And sometimes it's because they think they've already answered the question.
Oh.
Yeah. So this person, it won't rattle anything. I think I've already seen
Safe. They're safe.
That's right. And so every once in a while, I had one person who was wrestling with the difficulties, the pain of life. And I can't remember who he wanted. And I suggested, have you thought of John of the Cross? And he said, no. And I said, John had a terrible, he was trying to reform the Carmelites. Not always a popular thing to do. His brothers were not happy with him. And so they locked him in a closet. Yeah, in the monastery, because they didn't want him to have any impact on them. And sometimes they would remember to feed him.
Rough crowd.
Yeah. He's sitting there in this closet, and you think, no, this poor man has got to be depressed. He's writing this beautiful love poetry. Because he said, this is wonderful. I'm not distracted. I'm not worried about other things. I just feel the presence of God. And of course, it's in Spanish. And Spanish has a lovely lilt to it. It's a lot easier to rhyme. Spanish. And so those are the pieces. One man learned how to play the classical guitar because when he was in college, the Spanish teacher put Spanish to that kind of music, and often John of the Cross, since he's from Spain, his music is put to that classical guitar. The passion that people are willing to invest in those stories, it's just, it's an encouragement to all of us to notice and find some peace.
Yeah. Like a big part of the Walking with Giants, we chose the subtitle, Choose Your Guide, Pursue Your Purpose, and Deepen Your Walk with God. And I see so many pieces of people developing the gifts and fulfilling the callings that God's given them as they walk with their giant. I know that happened with me with every single giant I walked with.
Yes. Yeah. I appreciate, a lot of the people, they're good people. They're very sincere. And what I find is I watch them take off one hat, like their counselor hat or their teacher hat or their pastor hat, and put on this hat of becoming a spiritual director, of journeying with someone, and it frees you from trying to fix people, which that never works anyway, or giving them advice. Nobody listens anyway. I taught high school for many years. I know they don't listen, but what can happen is 10, 20 years later, I go for reunions, and they go, do you remember when you said? No, I don't remember that. But some of those pieces stay with people. And that's what I see with working with adults. There's such a sincerity of wanting to know the depths of God. That like Julian, she wanted to stand with Jesus in his death so that he would know he was not alone. And she lived during the time of the Black Plague. A lot of people were dying quickly and alone. And so she didn't want Jesus to be alone. And so her standing there at the cross, then that's what revealed to her Jesus's joy in being willing to die for us. I think Jesus was very happy that she was willing to, I'd never heard anyone else talk about that experience. Certainly the gospel writers didn't put that in, but I always think it was because they were men. Sorry, Robert. Yeah, women would have written that a little different, because we would want the personal piece. But Julian got to give that to us, and so that's the journey that makes a difference for me.
Yeah. So have there been any people that have chosen a giant that surprised you, or that there was a surprising moment on their journey where you just kind of went, oh,
I think the ones that surprise me are the really old ones. Like we had one person, and I noticed in your book, was from Athanasius. Yeah. And, that's before there was a theology. It's, in the early 100s. And he said that he chose Athanasius because it was before there were any categories to describe who Jesus was. He wanted to watch somebody who wrestled with what is the reality, what is the truth that is the person of Jesus. And I was really impressed with that.
Yeah.
And then often there are people who choose, for them it's a great surprise. But I had one woman who was not Catholic, and she chose Mother Teresa. And she said, kind of famous, but she said, I'm not Catholic. I've never been to India. What could I possibly get from that? And she said she loved hearing Mother Teresa saying, as I look at the person dying in the street, I can't cure them, but I can make sure that they do not die alone. And this woman who's reading that, she said, I don't think that's my call. But, there are a lot of people that quickly pass by my job. And can I see them? Can I acknowledge that they are a real loving person that God loves? And that's what I saw Mother Teresa do. And so she became a reminder to treat people with kindness. What more could we hope for from a person's life?
Exactly. I know in one of the groups that I led, we were in the process of everybody choosing their giant. And this one older gal, she was probably 70 to 80 years old. And when she chose her giant, it was shocking to me because she chose a Lizzie Howland Tilley. You might have seen her testimonial in the book. She was a actual pilgrim on the Mayflower, and it turned out she was a 14th generation descendant of this woman in the workshop in my Journey with a Giant group. And talk about being surprised. I thought I knew everything someone would present, like any giant they would bring out. Okay, yep. But when she brought her, and then we all in the group got to learn all year long about this woman from hundreds of years ago whose faith formed all of ours because she had 14 children, and they all shaped all of us who live in the United States.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah,
it was amazing. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's so great to do this as a group. Like when we did it in spiritual direction training, the impact of walking with giants is just multiplied when you do it in a group.
Yes, it is. It gives people freedom to talk about their own story, which most of us are a little reluctant. I don't want to seem like I'm a holy person, but there is something about, look how this person read scripture and it made a difference. And I can do that too, or whatever. So that's the piece that I like. It makes such a difference in people's lives. And the power of story. I mean, is that not what the gospel is? It's the story of all of the people around Jesus and what they remembered. And can't you just see after the resurrection, what do you remember? What's the best story about Jesus? And then somebody started writing that down. And that's what I think happens in our program. People come in with a piece of the story. I want you to get to know my friend, this giant who is impacting me. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thanks for sharing all those. I love hearing more about the people that you've observed walking with giants. Yeah. So, Diane, why do you think this practice is important in the world that we live in today?
I think people today are feeling untethered. They really feel like they're rootless. Yeah. As they, look around, and it just seems that there's just such chaos swirling around them. And for us within the Christian tradition, it's so wonderful to be able to say, we have friends who have gone before us. This, that great cloud of witnesses. My fingers were flying once over the computer, and cloud became crowd. Great crowd of witnesses. That's true. Yes. From every, generation and century and different parts of the world, their stories might have a different sound because of when they lived. But that connection with God, that depth, is just so wonderful. And it's so encouraging to people. I think it's that sense of people's isolation and loneliness. And people need friends. And having a giant, it's not an imaginary friend, like what the little kids will do, because they want to have somebody to talk to or to talk about. But there's something in the human psyche that says, I don't want to be alone. And so it seems to me that journeying with a giant gives us someone to lean on, and someone who can be an example for us. And even if the circumstances of their life seem so different from ours, it's the same world. I love those, those early hermits who went out to the desert, and they think, "Oh, I'll get away from everything. I'll spend all my time in prayer." And what the message was, you take your devils with you. Anything
That's
that's a temptation, anything that, okay. And I loved one of the stories. The monk, the hermit, as he got older, he hated the long trek down to the water. So he started moving down closer and closer to the water. And one day when he got to the water, Jesus was there. And he said, "Oh, I'm so happy to see you because I didn't have to walk very far." And Jesus said to him, "Did you know that every step you take to come to the water is a prayer?"
mm,
And the hermit thought, "Oh my goodness, I've been cutting down on my prayer because I've been taking fewer and fewer steps." And so he moved back up into the mountains so that he would have to take steps to come down. So those are the pieces that I think people are looking for a word of encouragement. And these giants who are people who recorded and kept their pieces of life and connection with God, they have a resource that can make such a difference in people's lives. And certainly that is a piece that becomes foundation steps for people to build that relationship.
yes. So, what encouragement would you offer to someone who's intrigued by this practice, but they may think, "Oh, it's a little maybe unattainable spiritually for me," or I don't know if it's necessary.
Yeah. I think the thing that can be helpful is to start with someone's life story that makes sense to you. My middle name is Treese, and my dad had a great devotion to Saint Treese, the little flower. And she only lived to be 24. And I think, boy, she didn't have a long time to play.
Wow.
Um, but
Mhm.
but she looked at her life and she said, "I can find a little way. I can be kind to my neighbor. I can not put up a big fuss when I get the worst job or whatever." And so she found a way in a very small world um, to be close to God. That's the piece that I think that encouragement that we need. Other people figure this out. So for us to find someone whose story can be a word of encouragement for us. And there are wonderful resources and stories. I noticed, you were very fortunate with Fred Rogers to have, these wonderful
Oh.
materials and
Mhm.
most people don't have that. I mean, some of them we don't even know what they look like. But, that's not the important part. The important part is that relationship, the depth of who they are, because God was at work. So it can help to find someone something that's intriguing to you that you would like to explore. And I appreciate that you give, the long list of possible
Yeah.
clients. And that list continues to explore and expand.
Mm.
We did have a gentleman who he said a few years ago, he says, "I noticed that it's pretty white."
Oh, yes.
And he said, "Have you ever thought of adding like Howard Thurman?" Oh,
Mhm.
people love Howard Thurman, and such a depth in his story. And the person who gave that presentation said Howard Thurman had a great love and affection for his grandma. And his grandma was born into slavery. And the gentleman who gives the presentation, he said, "I have a great love and affection for my great grandmother, who
Mm.
was born into slavery."
Yeah.
So as he's reading Howard Thurman, he could hear his story and that desire for the community of the beloved that God is interested in all of us. And so that's for a lot of people that kind of expanded. And as Dominicans, we have a great affection for Martin de Porres and Rose of Lima, who are Dominicans from South America, and to hear their stories. So, to broaden some of that base of who we are and what we know. So I find that exciting. It's with giants, you never run out of another person to explore.
No.
And I love watching people's passion as they share those stories.
Yeah. And as we feel maybe that we're too small or our faith isn't developed to the point where, we maybe could connect that way with God. I mean, so many of the giants felt the same way.
That's right.
They felt the same.
Especially famous people, like Henry Bowen. And then you hear, how he just felt like when he first went to work at L'Arche with young people with disabilities, and he says, I'm a famous author. And the guy said, I get up and I get dressed every morning. That was his big accomplishment for the day. And Henry thought, who am I to decide which is more important in God's eyes?
Yes. I mean, Adam, that
Yes.
wrote about, that book was
powerful.
profoundly, oh my gosh, Adam could be studied as a spiritual giant.
Oh, very much so.
Yes. So I'm going to pose a fun question to you.
Okay.
It's our last question. So I'll give a little context here. In our formation classes, here's one of the questions that came up over and over again. And I'd never heard this before, but sometimes when you're in a process of discernment, your director from time to time will say, as you're trying to understand what God has for you, Lori, what is your prayer as you make this decision or as you think about this or this? Because when we give our prayer, it shows our heart. So as we close this session, I wanted to ask you, Sister Diane, after teaching this practice for so long, now seeing it go out into the world in this book, what is your prayer for this book, this practice?
My prayer is that people, individuals, will be able to know that they are beloved of God and that their story is important. And like that ripple that goes out, from the pebble, skipping stones, that my story impacts other people's stories. And that to me is such a word of encouragement. I don't have to move boulders. I just have to notice the ripples of my life going out and touching other people. And I watch that happen with the giants of, they lived maybe in a different century, a different part of the world, but their story still impacts my story. And my confidence in the presence of God in my life can be reinforced by that story. So I just think that we all find meaning for our lives, primarily in the story of Jesus. And I find it especially in the gospel stories. But sometimes I can feel like it's too familiar or it's too many centuries ago. So to find a new story, but I can hear the echoes of the old story. So that's my prayer, that people will be able to hear the echo of the Jesus story in their lives.
Yes. Amen to that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us today, for sharing your stories.
Yeah.
The treasure that is and will be to those who hear this podcast, and for your work at the Dominican Center and how that has poured into my life. It's made a life-changing difference. So I just
appreciate that, Lori.
I just think the world of you, and thank you for being here with us today.
You're welcome. It was really an honor to share how important these stories are, and I look forward to hearing more of the experiences of sharing stories.
Wow, what a gift. I don't even know what to say. I'm still reeling from all that Sister Diane shared. Just such a lovely person and full of story and life and impact even
Mhm.
in what she's experienced and the way she's helped others experience Jesus and experience God through walking with the journey. And this is just one way we've talked about it with her, of course, but many other ways. And so just what a gift to hear from her today. A woman who has both walked the road and also guided so many others through it. Right. And
Yes,
so,
yes. Yeah, I can't express the joy that I'm feeling right now. I mean, when we thought about the podcast series, I thought, oh my goodness, what if Sister Diane could come on and share with us about the context of this, the origin, what she's seen through the years. But Sister Diane is a busy woman. She holds a position in the diocese. She teaches many classes at the Dominican Center. But she so graciously, when I reached out just with a short email and said, "Hey, Sister Diane, this is what we're doing. Could you read my book?" She was one of my early readers and endorsers. And oh, by the way, I'm recording a podcast series. Would you have the time to come on and record with us? And this recording actually took us 3 takes to get it. But that she said yes, and what we just received. And the reason that she did it is because this woman is living out her passion and love for Jesus and the gifts that he's given her to bring to the world. This is what she's doing. She's living out her spiritual giant walk right now. And we just got to witness it. Praise God. Like, wow.
man,
Thank you, Sister.
I'm so blessed to be a part of it. And wow, for nothing else, just this conversation alone. Of course, we've had a lot of good guests already.
Yes.
So I don't want to minimize them by any means, but
No.
yeah, what a joy this episode has been to sit with Sister Diane. Wow. If you loved hearing from Sister Diane, would you just share this episode with a friend who you think might need some encouragement today? Or maybe it might be a friend you want to invite into this journey with you as you journey with giants together to grow in your faith. And would also like to invite you to visit Lori's website at lorigmelton.com. There you can download a free sneak peek, which includes the introduction and chapter 1 of her Journey with the Giant book. We look forward to being back with you soon. Have a great week.